Black men account for roughly 6.5% of the U.S. population. They make up 40.2% of the prison population.
We now have more African Americans under criminal supervision than all the slaves back in the 1850s.
Throughout American history, African Americans have repeatedly been controlled through systems of racial and social control that appear to die, but then are reborn in new form tailored to the needs and constraints of the time. You know, after the collapse of slavery, a new system was born, convict leasing, which was a new form of slavery. And once convict leasing faded away, a new system was born, a Jim Crow system that relegated African Americans to a permanent second-class status. And here we are, decades after the collapse of the old Jim Crow, and a new system has been born again in America, a system of mass incarceration that once again strips millions of poor people, overwhelmingly poor people of color, of the very rights supposedly won in the civil rights movement.
If you look at the history of Black people's various struggles in this country, the connecting themes is the attempt to be understood as full, complicated human beings. We are something other than this visceral image of criminality and menace and threat to which people associate with us.
When you cut on your local news at night, you see Black men being paraded across the screen in handcuffs.
Black people, Black men and Black people in general, are overrepresented in news as criminals. When I say overrepresented, that means they are shown as criminals more times than is accurate that they are actually criminals, right? Based on FBI statistics.
The Bureau of Justice reported that 1 in 3 young Black males is expected to go to jail or prison during his lifetime, which is an unbelievably shocking statistic.
The objective reality is that virtually no one who is white understands the challenge of being Black in America.
Civil rights activists began to be portrayed in the media and among many politicians as criminals, people who were deliberately violating the law, segregation laws that existed in the South.
The prison population in the United States was largely flat throughout most of the 20th century. It didn't go up a lot, it didn't come down a lot. But that changed in the 1970s. And in the 1970s, we began an era which has been defined by this term, mass incarceration.
This is a nation of laws, and as Abraham Lincoln has said, no one is above the law, no one is below the law.
I think that one of the most brilliant tactics of the civil rights movement was its transformation of the notion of criminality. Because for the first time, being arrested was a noble thing. Being arrested by white people was your worst nightmare. Still is, for many African Americans. So what they did, they voluntarily defined a movement around getting arrested. They turned it on its head.
It's with the Nixon era and the law and order period when crime begins to stand in for race.
If there is one area where the word war is appropriate, it is in the fight against crime.
Part of what he talked about was a war on crime, but that was one of those code words, what we might call dog whistle politics now, which really was referring to the Black political movements of the day, Black Power, Black Panthers, the anti-war movement, movements for women's liberation and gay liberation at that time, which Nixon felt compelled to fight back against.
Historically, when one looks at efforts to create reforms, they inevitably lead to more repression.
And so if we leave it up to them, what they're gonna do is they're gonna tinker with the system. They're not gonna do the sort of change that we need to see as a country to get us out of this mess, and they're certainly not gonna go backwards and fix the mess that they've made because they're not ready to make that admission. But as a country, I don't think we've ever been ready to make the admission that we have steamrolled through entire communities and multiple generations when you think about things like slavery and Jim Crow and all the other systems of oppression that have led us to where we are today.
Once somebody is arrested and convicted, they're gone. Nobody particularly cares about them. In many ways, the prison systems are sort of in the dark.
So it makes it a lot easier, cognitively and emotionally, it makes it a lot easier to say, send people there.
If you look at the whole problem, you say, what are we doing? We have too many laws, locking too many people up for too many things, giving them sentences that are too harsh, putting them in prison, and while they're in prison, doing very little, if anything, to rehabilitate them so that they can re-enter civil society when they get out.
You can tell the story of white leadership in America and never mention the FBI one time. You can't tell the story of black leadership, not one, without having to deal with the full weight of the criminal justice system weaponized against black dissent.